Recording in progress.
Good afternoon, everyone. We will call the Coronavirus Ad Hoc Committee for July the 2nd to order. Ms. Carrillo, if you will, please call the roll.
Brenham,
Here.
Barron,
Here.
Newton.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Next order of business is to accept the approval of the minutes from October the 17th, 2023. You can find those items on pages 5 through 9. I'll entertain a motion if there aren't any revisions.
Approve.
Second.
Further discussion?
Brenham,
Yes.
Barron,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Next item is the adoption of the agenda. Ms. Carrillo, do we have any changes to our agenda?
No, ma'am.
I'll entertain a motion to accept the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Carrillo?
Brenham,
Yes.
Barron,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Next order is the election of the chair. The floor is now open to accept nominations for the chair of the Coronavirus Ad Hoc Committee.
I'd like to nominate Gretchen Barron.
Other nomination? Hearing none, the nomination closed. Oh, I need a second for that? I need a second.
Yes.
Well, second for the motion to open nominations would have needed a second.
Okay, so
I withdraw my motion.
thank you. We could train wreck that. So I'll entertain a motion to I'll entertain a motion to open the election for chair.
So moved.
Second.
Hello.
Brenham,
Yes.
Barron,
Yes?
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Floor is now open to accept nominations for the chair.
All right. I nominate Gretchen Barron.
Other nomination? Hearing none, nominations are closed, and now we'll take the vote for nomination for chair for Gretchen Barron. Rillo?
Brenham,
Yes.
Barron,
Yes?
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Good, Ms. Carrillo, you have a puzzled look. Did I do?
I follow the guidelines of the county attorney. I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, all right. So just point of personal privilege. Thank you all for allowing me to chair this committee one more year. We don't know how long it's going to stay as an ad hoc committee. Definitely, we know that we are in the midst of grants. And as we are in the midst of grants, we want to keep the committee active until we disperse all of our funds. So with that, it's something near and dear to my heart. And so let's keep the party moving. So with that, we will move to item number 5, which is items for discussion and action. And we'll take 5A first, and that is a grants update, which you can find on page 10 through 13. And I see Ms. Assistant County Administrator Lori Thomas is online. We'll recognize you at this time, ma'am.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate your recognizing me. If we could go to page 10 of the packet, and then we're going to go through a brief update of the grants that we have issued for this, the ARPA grants that we have issued. If you'll go to the next page, please, Madam Clerk. So if you recall, we actually issued a total of 37 grants. 25 of these are subrecipient grants. 12 are beneficiary grants. Beneficiary grants are those that are using it directly for their own purposes. The total amount awarded was $7.596 million, with 5.9 of that being to subrecipients and 1.6 being to beneficiaries. You can see a breakdown of those numbers on the right-hand side in the charts, and how much has been expended. As you can see, only about 23% of the subrecipient awards have been expended at this point. However, about 70% of the beneficiary grants have been awarded at this point. I'm happy to take any questions on this chart, or if you'd like for me to move on, Madam Chair.
Any questions for Ms. Thomas at this time? Go ahead, Mr. Barron.
Well, just curious about the 23% and why it wasn't any higher.
Well, a lot of these subrecipient grants require quite a bit of documentation. They also require, if there's any products and things of that nature to be purchased, there are certain procurement requirements that are required, or that the subrecipients must use. And many of them, the projects were not potentially ready to be funded. And we did take a little while getting the grant applications, the grant award letters in place and contracts in place with the subrecipients. We are starting to see this move more quickly now, and we believe that in the next 3 months, you will see a great deal of this expended. If you recall, though, with this, the actual funding period for this, we said we would start to close these at the end of October so that any funds that were not expended could be re-obligated by the county so that we do not lose those funds.
Okay, thank you.
So ACA Thomas, real quick, and I'm assuming that we are going to make some type of communication, have some communication with the subrecipients. I think that we probably, if it's not already in place, let me ask it in a question form. I don't want to assume anything. So with that being said, how are we going to notify the subrecipients that October is this magical day?
We will be sending out emails to them this month, reminding them, because they do have to make a quarterly update to us at the end, for the end of June. At the time we receive those, we will then reply back to them, reminding them that that October is their magical date, if you will. And to be working with them. Additionally, they're being monitored by Guidehouse, if you recall. So they are also reminding them on their continual updates with them.
Okay, so with that, I think it's important, you made the statement that once we get their report, what happens when we don't get their report? Are we still going to communicate with them about this deadline?
Yes, ma'am, we will be, because if they don't send us a report, we will be sending them an email letting them know that they're not compliant, and also of the deadline.
And I just want to reemphasize the point that I think it's important, and it may be a little bit more legwork for our team, but to really kind of keep it in front of them, noting that October is coming. October is coming, so whether it's I think, at this point, it's July, with a monthly notice, I think would be very helpful for them, because many of them, we know the nature of the business. So with the nature of the business, out of sight, out of mind, I just want that we're doing everything that we possibly can to remind them that this date is coming.
Yes, ma'am. We'll make sure that happens.
Okay, thank you. Please proceed.
Can I have the next slide, please, Madam Clerk?
One moment, Ms. Thomas, Ms.
Councilwoman
Newton.
Newton. Yes, thank you. It's been a while. So, Ms. Thomas, just first, we've said it, but just for anyone listening, want to be clear that the reminding people about the October deadline is a reminder. There has been constant communication, and nobody should be surprised about the upcoming deadline. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Perfect. And then my next question is just going back to the substance of the communication. And so the funds have to be obligated by October, spent by October, some different thing by October, just so I'm clear.
The original agreement with the subrecipients is that they must be obligated and spent by October 31st. We will be working with them individually in the event that there is any disruption to their schedules.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Anything else from the body before we move forward? You got something, Ms. McBride? You recognize Ms. McBride.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a fiscal report. Will there also be a programmatic report in terms of progress or status towards achieving their objectives?
There will be once their project is complete. Right now, Guidehouse is collecting that information and working with the subrecipients to be certain that their projects are in place. As to a final report as to their outcome, that would have to be also in their information, in the final information that they send to us following the October deadline.
Okay, Madam Chair. Yeah, I was thinking about, sometimes you do status reports, like quarterly reports, or every 6 months. Do we have that in place? And on those reports, you get a progress of where they are programmatically.
The requirement of these particular grants with the federal government is that they quarterly are required to report to us their expenditures and general information, but not necessarily project updates. But we can ask for that information from them.
Thank you.
That's a good point, Ms. McBride. Thank you for lifting that up. Anything else from the body? If not, Ms. Thomas, please proceed.
Thank you. The next chart that you see here actually shows the activities of the subrecipients. As you can see, we have 2 subrecipients that have completed their projects and have expended all of their funds. We have two more that are above 90%. And then we have an additional 4 that are 70% or above. We did have one subrecipient that actually decided that they did not want to pursue their project, so that money will be deobligated. You can also see at the bottom what costs are being paid. As you can see, most of what's being paid in the subrecipients categories are for materials and supplies. The next highest category is personnel costs.
ACA Thomas, if you could at some point, do we have these percentages as far as the organizations are concerned? Could you provide us with the list of those organizations who've completed their projects? Because I think it's going to be important. One of the things that we talked about when we initially started this process was to, as a part of telling our story as Richland County, that we would also include the subrecipients as a part of that. So if we've got organizations that have completed projects using these funds, I definitely would like to see communications, go out and take a look at what they've done or interview them and things like that to say that, these are dollars that we put, reinvestment dollars that we put back into the community, and just kind of highlighting them.
Yes, ma'am. We can work with that, with communications for that.
That'll be great. Please continue.
Thank you. The next slide, please. Next shows you the 12 beneficiary projects that we actually have. Again, these are actually projects where the funds were reinvested back into the nonprofit. There are 12 of those. 5 of those are already 100% complete. 1 is 15% complete, and the remaining 6 have yet to begin to request their reimbursements. At the bottom there, you can see actually the project categories. 6 of these are for negative economic impacts related to COVID. 3 are related to COVID mitigation. 2 are to small businesses. And 1 is for aid to tourism, travel, or hospitality. And we will get the same information related to these that have completed their projects as well, so that you recall what they actually requested the funds for.
Great. Any questions? Okay, go ahead, Thomas.
That actually is the conclusion of my report on the grants to date. We just completed the second quarter the final quarter of the fiscal year 24. So we have not received reports from the subrecipients at this point, but as I said, they do have to give us the information by the 15th of this month so that we can actually complete our report to the federal government by July 31st.
Any questions in regard to the report that we just received from ACA Thomas? Ms. Newton?
Thank you. Ms. Thomas, and if this is an unfair question, then that's fine too. Well, I mean, you can let us know. I am wondering, as you look at this report, if this falls in line with what your expectations were, if it exceeds your expectations in terms of funds that were expended or falls somewhere below. And the reason that I say this could be an unfair question is, again, every organization is different. Sometimes an organization has a different amount of ramp up time. As you mentioned, they might just not have been in a position to receive the funds, which doesn't mean that they weren't working. It's just that there are a lot of restrictions on the ARPA fund. How is this about what you or Guidehouse were expecting at this point?
I really couldn't answer that question, but I'm happy to talk with Guidehouse because they obviously see more than we do with regards to this. So I'm happy to pose that to them and then to get back with you if that would be satisfactory.
That would be fine. And I, for example, know I have a friend who runs a state agency where they had to give away so many millions of dollars in grants that went through their application process, and it just took time to be able to get that out. So I'd appreciate finding out later. Thank you.
Certainly. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Okay, so Ms. Thomas, you said this concludes your update.
Yes, ma'am. This concludes my report.
So we'll move to item 5B, which is youth and recreation, which is our final category. We set aside $1 million. We did, and just give a little backstory, we set aside $1 million for youth and recreation services. We had several applicants that applied. However, once we went through the application process, it was the committee as well as through some scoring that we realized that those applicants who had submitted under those categories did not necessarily fall in line with the vision that was put forth by the committee. And so we held this money in our committee, but at this point, because we are looking, October has to be the deadline of things, we need to make a decision on what we're going to do with the money. Now, council, through the recommendation of this body, did vote any money that is not spent will be used and go towards the DSS Family Service Center. And I'm okay having the money that it's not being used, but I will say, and I've said it to many of you all, with all that we have going on in Richland County right now, with our youth, I do have a challenge with us just kind of lumping this back into that fund for DSS, noting without making some attempt to put it in the hands of organizations that are out there doing the work and can meet the guidelines of ARPA. I see it every day, whether it's with the work that I do with my company or out in the community. And so I want us to have a conversation here today about how we can support an organization that can meet the guidelines. And I know, Ms. Thomas, I'm going to, you and I have had this conversation. I know that you've had it with Ms. Newton as well, but I think it's worthy of us having a conversation in a public setting. And that is, we've had some conversation about perhaps even looking at the Recreation Commission to see they have ramped up their programming. We note that they meet some guidelines when it comes to being negatively impacted with or by COVID. I know that we had some conversation about them being able to, we're going to have to identify zip codes and things like that to make the direct connection. But Ms. Thomas, if you could talk to us a little bit and give us some feedback on if this could work, because here we have an organization that's already, in our system, if you allow me to say, already doing the work, already putting forth programs. Whereas if putting forth an application to reopen up the application, I don't know that we're going to meet those guidelines, meet the time period to do so. So Ms. Thomas, if you would, please just kind of address that for us.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair. The requirements for the programs, of course, still would have to fall into the category that they would have to show that recipients, if they are a subrecipient and they are going to fund programs, that it is to benefit those that were negatively impacted by COVID. A great deal of whether the programming would be eligible would be based upon who would receive benefit of the funds and how they would be used, for what purposes they would be used. Fortunately, the funds cannot be used on asset building, so that's not a possibility. And additionally, we're running into time constraints because anything relative to any asset that might be used would have to be procured in such a way and contracted to meet the requirements of the December 31st, 2024 obligation period. So a lot of determining whether a program meets the requirements, not eligible, but meets the requirements for the funding would be more in the details of the program itself and who the program is benefiting and showing the negative impact of COVID.
Thank you, ACA Thomas. So I just want to do a follow-up with that. So I think that a lot of, when we look at the Recreation Commission, we definitely can make some connections, as we note that there were certain communities that were hit hard, if you allow me to say, because of COVID. And so if the Recreation Commission, and this is not, I had a very high-level conversation with them, but if that's something that this body would like to explore, then I think if we take into consideration programming in those particular areas, we may be okay when it comes to that. And then you made mention of who will receive the services and how. And so, I don't hear where this is a challenge programmatically, but I dare not speak for the Recreation Commission to know what their management can handle. But my one question that I will ask before I turn it over to my colleagues would be that these funds, we did allow for organizations, they could do reimbursements that were backdated. So if the Recreation Commission has already done programming in these particular communities, they would have to then get I guess, the zip codes or whatever for the participants, and then be able to substantiate program, to make sure that the program is aligned. Is that correct?
That's correct. And one would think that would probably be the only way that they could programmatically spend $1 million in the next few months.
Okay. I would agree with that, but Yeah, that, again, that would be one of the things that we'd have to have a conversation with. I do want to open this up for the body to have perhaps the Recreation Commission is not the best way. But I would like to say today that when we come out of this committee meeting, we are sure about what is going before full council as a recommendation as to what we're going to do with this category. We note that no action has to be taken if we decide that, you know what, we're not going to spend the money because we've already made a decision. If we don't spend the money, we know where it's going. But I do want us to tie a bow in this category today. So it's open for discussion. Ms. Newton.
That was a lot. So I think first, let me say that it was my deepest wish that we could pump this money into the community for youth services. And I was the person who made the motion to increase it from $500,000 to $1 million, because I do see that there's just not only is there a lot of need in our community, there's a lot of need for youth and providing for those services. And so if you can more than fully support something, I more than fully support that idea, which is why I have despaired a little that as time has moved on, I haven't seen a viable option for us to do the funding the way that I had hoped we would be able to do it for this category. And so I guess I had made peace in my heart that many youth will be served at the Family Services Center, and so we would be helping them in some way. As it relates to the Richland County Recreation Commission, I guess here are my thoughts. First, I have some questions and a concern, which is not about the Recreation Commission. My concern is if you say that the goal is that we have it wrapped up in a bow today to send to full council, I don't see how that's possible. If the bow is we're sending it to DSS, then that's done. But since we don't have a specific Richland County Recreation Commission program, since we haven't heard from them formally, since we don't know what they could do or how they could do it, the most specific thing that we could possibly send to council would be that we'd like to explore what we could do with them. And so I guess if that's a bow, then maybe, but to me, that's not wrapping it up. So my primary question would be, I guess, about timing, because the questions, I didn't know we were having this conversation today, by the way. I thought our conversation was going to be around awarding the funds to DSS. So the previous conversations that I had with ACA Thomas as it related to the Recreation Commission were specifically around, could we do summer programming and summer camps? Could we provide activities for our young people so that at the time that they needed it most, when parents are at work and school is out, they could have things. And so there were some ARPA obstacles that Ms. Thomas had identified for us that maybe she could point out again. And so we went back and forth. We talked about equipment and physical infrastructure, and I just didn't see a way that we were able to do what we wanted to do with ARPA. So would I consider it? Yes. I'm concerned about timing. It's July. Once July is over, we don't meet again till the end of August. And then we're looking at having people have expended funds by October. So I think that that's really tight, and I don't know if that's realistic. And I'm sorry, I'm saying a lot of things because there's a lot of things that were said. So I guess just the last thing that I would say is I am not a proponent of this backdating programs idea. I guess somebody could share more information, but if we're going to provide these dollars, I'd like them to be prospective or looking forward, as opposed to saying maybe they did some program in the past and we're going to reimburse them now. And secondly, one of the beauties of the Richland County Recreation Commission is they do serve the entire county. And yet there are ARPA requirements that might not allow us to distribute those funds everywhere. So just to come back, my questions are, around what really the objective is that we're trying to do for today, what the timing is, and if that would support the Recreation Commission meeting the ARPA requirements of obligating and expending the funds by October, if we were to do something like that to ensure that, we're supporting the whole county, and then that I wouldn't support backdating. So thank you for listening to my TED Talk.
Thank you for your TED Talk.
I'm done.
And I always appreciate them. And I hear you wholeheartedly, and ultimately, I know where this is probably going to go. And then, this conversation is going to go to, we are more than likely going to take these funds and, put them into the Family Service Center. And I fully support that. Ms. McBride knows that I love her and I love that project. And I want to make sure that that's her legacy legacy project, as far as I'm concerned, and I will support it. But it's a hard pill for me to swallow when I'm in and out of these communities every day and there's so much need. So I know that, we don't meet this time or we don't do this, if it is, we have an option. Family Service Center, no motion is needed, nothing is needed. The only other choice, and I'm open to, if there's somebody else besides the Recreation Commission, having this conversation. I pressed play on this baby, weeks ago, but we couldn't have a meeting because we didn't have a quorum. And so I feel like if it's something that we are invested in doing, I'll be glad to get the conversation started with the Recreation Commission to see if this is viable, this is something that they could do. And even to say, to your point, ideally, no, we don't want organizations to backdate, if you'll let me say, to backdate projects, but it was an allowable expense. So it was something that could take place. So yeah, we want to forecast and get some other things, but the way I look at it is if we fund the Recreation Commission or reimburse the Recreation Commission from projects that they've had in the past or that they're planning to have, then now that frees up their budget to do more things. So I'm only saying Recreation Commission because I don't know anybody else. If there was something, it's another organization that, that we could, easily partner with, I'd be fully open. But I'm not going to belabor the point. If it's the will of this body that, you guys don't see that it's a viable option for us to move forward with anyone in this short period of time, I will respect that and note that those funds will go, to the DSS Family Service Center. But it'll be a hard pill for me to swallow. I'll tell you the truth. It will be.
If I could just react
Sure.
to that quickly. So again, it is a hard pill for me because, you and I have gone through this all year trying to find a way to expend these funds. So what I can say is, in the previous conversations, the ideas that I had to expend the funds did not meet all of the ARPA guidelines. And so while we want to get the money into the community, we also have to, dot every I and cross every T. And so as it relates to the Recreation Commission, I don't have a heartburn about, in fact, it's the opposite of that. With the ideas that I've had, there hasn't been a path. So if you have found another path that will work, then let's explore that. Just every nook and cranny that I explored, everything I asked, every program that I looked into just didn't work for these specific guidelines, up to and including I inquired if it was possible for us to treat these funds similar to how we treated the affordable housing funds. And Ms. Thomas, I'll let you address this if I'm incorrect. I was told that just based on how the accounting shook out, we weren't able to do that. So again, if there is a path that will provide services, directly for youth as we had originally intended, I want to pursue that. Just none of the options that I looked into with the Recreation Commission worked. So if you have one, great. And if not, then let's fund the Family Services Center. So I'm here to support whatever works.
Recognize Ms. Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As much as I love the Family Service Center, I also love our youth. And we know in Richland County what we're going through now. We know how many kids are being shot. We know how many kids are being killed. And we need to do whatever we can to prevent the crime that's taking place. So if there is a way that we could use some of the funds to help address the needs of our youth in Richland County, then I'm for 100% to find a way to help these kids. We cannot afford to continue to do nothing. And this is happening in all of our most vulnerable communities, but it's happening all over Richland County. Because just because it happens in one low-income area doesn't mean it's not happening in another area. So the crime that we're having with our youth, we need to look at prevention. We need to look at primary, secondary, and tertiary prevention. So if there's a way that we can help save one youth, two youth, then I think we need to do whatever is possible. In terms of the allocation for the ARPA funds, the October date, that's the final date for the expenditures. For that year, are there funding for additional years for those ARPA funds? That's just it, that 2024 is the final funding. Yeah, we're really in a very peculiar situation right now, but I do want just to go on record letting you know that I understand and do support. Thank you.
So as we have this conversation, because would it be the will of the body? And I know, everybody's got barbecue ribs and baked beans on their brain. It's the 4th of July weekend at White and Blue. So I know that, and I know we've got staff kind of scattered this week. Would it be the will of the body if we could, and of course this would be in the form of a motion, to direct administration to have a meeting with the Recreation Commission to have this conversation, to see, I'm even thinking about, the Sheriff's Department has a summer program that's presently going on, and it's fee-based. So, do we want to perhaps look at scholarships for the Sheriff's Department? I think that if we look internally to see what we have going on and how we could possibly use those funds for right now programming, we may be able to do so. But, if that is something that the body would like to see us do and ask or direct the administrator to do so, I'll be more than happy to entertain a motion.
Madam Chair.
Recognized.
I would just say that both of you, my colleagues here on this committee, are mothers, and there is that old country song called Mama Tried. Both of y'all have tried. We have all tried so hard for so long on this committee to get the money to the places that we thought it could best serve the intended recipients. And I like Councilwoman Newton, an earlier reference, without reluctance, I would send this money to the Family Services Center without question. That center is a facility through which the youth of Richland County will be served. And I would feel, again, without reservation, that those funds and that facility would be reaching families that were in fact negatively impacted by COVID, which, again, at this point is like 4 years ago. We're definitely under time constraints here, and that's just the reality of it. That we've been very public about the application process, the review process, and we're just very much at the end of the road. And so I'm super appreciative motives of the conversation, but I'll just be very happy to send this $1 million to the Family Services Center.
You recognize, Ms.
So a comment for Mr. Branham and then a question for staff. I don't know that song, but I will ask Apple Music to fire it up when I'm in the car. But I can say these mamas did try, and we have been trying, and there have been meetings and conversations that have happened, and so that is certainly true. And so, ACA Thomas, regretfully, I am putting you on the spot with this question right now. Considering that it's July, which I don't know how that happened, others may, it's July, that we have 3 months, one of which council isn't really meeting, but I'm willing to do whatever. So we have 3 months to identify organizations, define programs, vote in council to commit funds and all of that. Is that something that you see as realistic with the requirements that you have to do on the back end? Or asked a different way, what would be a realistic path? Like what would a timeline look like to make that happen, even if that means the realistic timeline is we'd have to have all this information on Thursday or whatever? What information can you provide from a timing perspective? And also, if there's any additional information you can share just in terms of, again, these specific requirements we're trying to meet, because I know everything I threw against the wall just couldn't quite meet the ARPA requirements.
Well, I never like to do this, but I need to try to answer your question. I need to ask a question. Are we looking at prospective programs, or are we looking at programs that happened in the past?
That might be an individual question, because for me, I only want to look forward, but I'm one person. Maybe you need to answer both ways.
Yeah, I would agree, Ms. Newton. I'm open to either way, because as I stated previously, if an organization has funds that they can get reimbursed for something that they've done, now they can do more. That's how I look at it. So I'm open to either way.
I'm not saying that it would be impossible, but it would be very difficult to make the timeline work, because even on a reimbursement situation, you have to evaluate the expenditure to determine if it was procured appropriately, if it was used appropriately, and if it benefited the harmed party, those who were most negatively impacted by COVID. I don't know what documentation the Recreation Commission has. I don't know what information or what programs they have. So I really am uncertain if this could happen in a timely manner, because additionally, once we would identify that, a grant contract would have to be executed. And then from that point, you would have to be able to evaluate what you have said was going in. In other words, they say, this is my program and these are my expenditures. And you say, okay, that's good. Well, now you start to ask for the reimbursements and you start to get the documentation. If the documentation is not appropriate or is lacking in some way, then it may or may not fit the criteria. So it's very difficult for me to say whether it could be done or not, and especially to expend $1 million.
So we are talking about we have $1 million. Maybe we don't talk about that we have $1 million. Maybe we talk about that we have $200,000. That does, to me, state that, I could see it it's easier to expend, number one, $200,000. It's also easier to gather documentations and such. And so, Mr. Branham, I'm going to keep singing your little country song. Mama's trying here. I'm really trying. So, it could be, instead of the 100 or the 1 million, we look at a couple of 100,000. But it looks like I might be hitting a brick wall in this conversation. And I know what they say about a dead horse.
So
At some point, you gotta get off of it. And I think this horse might be dead.
It might be. I've ridden a dead horse or two with the vulture in the past, so I know how that goes. So here's what I'll say, Miss Barron, because my heart is with your heart. And I didn't want to give up on this a year ago when people told us they did. So I don't want to give up now. So what I will say is, based on the information that I have from other things that I've tried, that Ms. Thomas has said today, I don't see a viable path. If you right now can paint a picture of a viable path, I am happy to accept it. I just haven't seen that picture painted yet. I will also say, however, that we as county council, and this is not what we wanted, but that the path to help our kids, no matter what, it doesn't end in this committee. And so if we have to put this particular path to rest, while it will certainly be sad, that does not preclude us from looking for other funding sources, other methods, and other ways that we can address what we all know is a really important need in the community. So if you have a specific path you want to recommend that'll work, I mean, if you got $5 they'll approve for sure, whatever, I will accept that. I just don't see that path. So I don't know what the country song says, after Mama tried, but I think we need to move on.
Madam Chair. You to know, and y'all to find out after the meeting.
Don't worry, we're gonna be out for music today, because we're gonna find out about Mama Tried. So what this is, and God knows, this is sure Gretchen D. Barron fashion. If there's nothing else on this subject, we're just gonna close the discussion for today. And if I call another meeting, then that means that we have other options. And that's, so if there's nothing further on this matter, I'm just gonna leave it open, because the truth is, we don't have to take any action to say that this goes to the Family Service Center. And I just like to keep my options open and to see, what exploration I can do in the next week or so. And if we come up with something, I'm going to shop it by y'all and see what we can do. But I can't, at this point, I don't have a peace about letting this go. I don't. And maybe that's just my extra passion. I eat, breathe, live children. And so I'll just leave it there unless y'all have anything else. Otherwise, we can move on with our agenda.
Yes, I just have a question and a statement. The statement first, I will come to any special call meeting if there's a path. So my question, though, for our attorney is, I just want to confirm, a statement has been made several times, and so I just want to confirm that it's correct, and maybe it's for you and Ms. Thomas, just to confirm that no action is required to send these funds to DSS. No separate motion, no other action, that the previous motion that we passed will automatically send it on. Sorry, Family Services Center.
Yeah, Madam Chair.
I recognize.
That's correct. The motion that was made previously, or that council voted on, said that whatever unexpended funds in the Youth and Recreation column would go to the Family Services Center. So that happens automatically if it's not expended.
Okay, so just wanted to confirm that. Thank you, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, and to be clear, Attorney Wright, it's just not this category, but it's all categories.
Right.
Anything further? If not, item 6 is next on our agenda.
Move to adjourn?
Second?
Ms. Carrillo?
Brenham,
Yes.
Barron,
Yes?
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.